Well, the winter conditions have made things difficult, to say the very least, when it comes to trying to get around and out of driveways. In particular, my driveway, I shouldn't say in particular, I should say including my driveway, made the cardinal mistake of letting it freeze up on Sunday night, I guess it would have been. Yeah, Sunday night. Should have gone out and tackled it then, but didn't. And it froze like a block, and then what made it worse was the snow plow, the sidewalk plow then came by, and it created two large ridges on either side, and it's a good thing I've got a vehicle with some height to it, because if I had a car, I wouldn't be able to get out of my driveway, and I'm contemplating what I'm going to do about it, because it's going to take a Herculean effort. I don't know, if like a sledgehammer, an axe, dynamite. I don't know what it's going to take to blast out the ice. It's going to warm up tomorrow, thankfully. At least the word said it's going to warm up a bit to around 1 degree, something like that, with some sunshine. But you can't get ice anywhere in the region, in the city, in the province. We've been running stories this morning about reports of hardware stores that had stock of ice and sand. People drove there and found out that it was not to be. So, and now people are selling ice and salt, or rather selling salt and sand on online on Facebook Marketplace for inflated prices. Again, not selling ice. There's lots of ice around. That's free. But salt and sand. So people are profiteering at every turn, every time you get an opportunity to jack up a price, you'll do it, won't you? Anyway, woe is me. I'll figure it out somehow, some way. Between Kelly and I, we'll figure it out. She'll probably be the one who'll figure it out. But yeah, the driveways are just an absolute disaster right now because of this storm and the weather. My oh my, the winds. It's been cold. It's been nasty. We are not used to this type of weather anymore. We are wimps, folks. Anyway, welcome to the show. Hope you had yourself a great long weekend. Blake Priddle is behind the glass again today. Vanessa is away once again, and we will open the phone lines today. A little extended call-in segment. We're going to open the phone lines at about 10:45 till 1 o'clock because we had some guest challenges, some scheduling issues, so that means a little extra time for our call-in. After I have a chat with my 10:30 guest, Moshe Lander, we will then open the phone lines and start taking your calls till noon. And then, of course, the Science Files returned with Dr. Rob Thacker. So look forward to chatting with Rob Thacker. Among the things that you can talk about, I'm curious to know how many of you out there are watching this Four Nations Cup Face-Off Championship. I have watched some of it, not glued to it, but watched some of it. Of course, Saturday night's game with the United States was a heated affair, lots of passion going on, 3 fights. There was a fight before the game even started. I've never seen that in my life in international hockey, a staged fight. And then I think there was 3 fights in 11 seconds or something like that. And Montreal, as again, emotions were high, politically charged as to what's going on. I would bet you, folks, most of the NHL players wouldn't have a clue what any of this is all about. Probably because, let's face it, they're likely not tuned into politics. Probably don't really care. Doesn't affect their life much. They're multimillionaires. But anyway, whatever. Are you watching it? Is the hockey what you expect for this type of level? It's pretty entertaining, I have to say. I've not been glued to it, but I've watched it. I watched it yesterday while I was bouncing around the house a little bit. I watched Canada beat Finland. They were up 4-0, and I turned the channel and watched something else after that. They ended up winning 5-3 to punch their ticket to the final on Thursday night in Boston, which I will indeed tune into. I think that'll be a pretty exciting game. I think that'll be something worth watching. So that's one of the questions that I'm going to ask you. Are you watching the Four Nations Cup or Four Nation Championship, I guess was what it's called, Four Nation Face-Off Championship? And are you enjoying it, and what are you thinking about it? Also, during the call-in segment, the Conservatives' favorite slogan, Axe the Tax. I have been saying on this show that it is pretty much neutered, but look, not according to Pierre Poilievre. He's saying they're keeping it. They're going with it. And it's their rallying cry, and they feel that it's just as applicable as it has ever been, axe the tax. So after much reflection, Pierre Poilievre said, I've concluded that the carbon tax will be an even bigger issue in the coming election, he told reporters in Ottawa over the weekend. So is it the right move, the right slogan, axe the tax? Does it still resonate with you? What are your thoughts on that? And has your support for Pierre Poilievre moved at all through any of this? Do you still support him, or have you, if you've not supported him, do you like what he's saying now? What are your thoughts on Poilievre and axe the tax and what they got going on? The field of contenders to replace Prime Minister Trudeau is just 3 weeks. In just 3 weeks' time, appears to be set. The campaigns for all 5 remaining candidates for the Liberal Party leadership say they have delivered their final payments of $125,000 to the party, which were due Monday by 5 p.m. That means each campaign shelled out $350,000 in entrance fees, a high bar for a short race. Liberal spokesperson Parker Lund confirmed that Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Frank Baylis, Ruby Dalla, and Karina Gould have all made their final payments. Carney's campaign boasted over the weekend it had raised a whopping $1.9 million so far. Do you have a preferred candidate in the Liberal race? Has your mind made up? Are you waiting to see what they have to say? What are your thoughts on the Liberals? And do you think that this is basically going to be a coronation of Mark Carney, or do you think that some of these other contenders have an outside chance? And the Trump administration, of course, it wouldn't be a day without talking about Donald Trump, has been firing several hundred Federal Aviation Administration employees, upending staff on a busy air travel weekend, just weeks after a January fatal mid-air collision in Washington. I thought this is pretty interesting stuff, folks, the way that the Trump administration has gone about its business, and with DOGE, of course, the Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk. Anyway, some other things that we can talk about as well. I'll get your take on that. Lots of other things to get to also. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening, folks. We very, very much appreciate it. As mentioned, I look forward to hearing from many of you when we open the phone lines, beginning at about 10:45 until 1 o'clock, or till noon, rather. And then the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker. All right, joining me now for a chat is Jeff Irvine, Executive Director of the Lobster Council of Canada. Jeff Irvine, welcome to the show. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Todd. Glad to be here.
All right, so you're fresh off a seafood trade delegation, which in Europe. How did things go?
I think it went very well. We had 14 Atlantic Canadian companies join us off and on in the 3 countries, Italy, France, and the UK. We had facilitated business-to-business meetings set up in each of those places with qualified buyers, importers, retailers, wholesalers. And I mean, we just finished last week, but the surveys are due soon. But the comments were very positive.
Okay, tell us about some more of the comments, some of the substance here, what you were hearing.
Sure. Well, we do these missions every year. Typically, in recent years, we've gone to Asia, 3 different countries in Asia. This year, we decided to go to Europe many months ago, before the tariff discussions happened, because Europe is such a traditional, steady market for Canadian seafood. So a number of the companies have established relationships there, but a number of them were new exporters. So for those with established relationships, it was sort of meeting their customers, reacquainting themselves, and for the newer exporters, it was meeting people for the first time. So seafood is still very much a relationship business. You have to know the person, you have to trust them. So lots of really good feedback about how the meetings went, what people learned. We also, in each country, we have a day where we go out and we go to retailers, we go to logistics providers. We have briefings from our Canadian trade commissioners. So lots of positive comments from all of that.
All right. So, what are the possibilities of replacing or making a dent in what we might lose through this tariff war?
Well, we've been trying to diversify our market for Canadian seafood, lobster, in my case particularly, for a long time, many decades. It's ongoing. We're constantly working on diversifying from the U.S. In live lobster, we've had great success shipping a lot more lobster to China, to South Korea, some countries like that. But it's a long-term process. So we're never going to replace the United States as a customer. But this has been a reality check for a lot of people that we have to start really doubling down on our investment in trade development outside of the U.S. And I think this is a great start.
Okay, so what type of percentages? I don't know if you can break it down into percentages. Are you thinking 20, 30%, 40%, 50%? What type of percent do you think that we can try and eat into into those losses in the somewhat near future?
Well, I mean, we don't know if the losses are going to happen yet, so this is all speculative, and we don't know what the impacts of tariffs will be. So it's again, we're just rolling the dice here. But when you think about for frozen lobster, which is 55% of Canada's lobster export by value, the U.S. is 75% of our business. So we can do our best to channel that elsewhere, and we will be successful in some ways. But it's very tough to replace a 75% market. For live lobster, the U.S. and China are about 40% each. So we've done well to diversify our live lobster market, and I think there's some opportunities in the Middle East, for example, parts of Europe, and Asia always is a big opportunity for live lobster. But frozen is more difficult. But on this mission, we had a bunch of frozen lobster companies, and they're doing their level best to focus some of their sales, at least in Europe, and I know that's happening in Asia as well.
All right. Is there anything that we have to give up the other way? Obviously, trade is give and take, and is there something that might we have to give in order to get?
Well, some of these markets are more particular than the U.S. market. For example, most European retailers demand that you have some type of eco-certification on your seafood, on your fishery that the seafood comes from, before they'll even list your products. They may have food safety certifications. It's becoming more apparent in Europe that animal welfare is becoming much more of a big deal. Labeling, packaging, they're being very aggressive with mandating recyclable packaging. So for some of these non-U.S. markets where there's more regulatory demand, yes, it's more difficult. And you have to have a company who's sophisticated enough to be able to manage all those certifications, manage all those requirements. So it's that's the give. You have to be ready to package it, label it, and harvest it in the ways that they want.
Okay, and how much of a pivot would that be for our Canadian companies to do?
Not terribly. We do much of it anyway. So we're in good shape that way. Most of our processors and shippers have the required certifications. All lobster from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and PEI is certified to the MSC, which is the eco-certification standard. So we're in good shape. But not everybody is. Not every company is. So we'll require some changes in-house for some companies. But other than that, it's a mental thing. It's getting your head around not taking the easy sale, but going for a sale that's maybe a little more complicated. And sort of economics will most likely drive that when and if these tariffs happen, and when we're facing a much different sort of economic environment in the market.
Okay, so you say when and if. I think at some point you have to pivot to assuming that they're going to happen, though there's really more indication at this point to believe that they're going to happen than not. That's my takeaway. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm like most people who really knows. I don't want to speculate. Suffice to say that we're preparing. We're working with all the governments. We're working with trade associations in the U.S. We're advocating as aggressively as we can against them. But I think everybody is sort of steeled to the fact that they could happen. But who knows? I think I'm really impressed by how Canadians have come together in the last few weeks. I'm impressed by how our governments have shown that. And it's been a wake-up call, and I think it's one we maybe needed. So let's see if we can expand trade between the provinces. Let's expand our trade development, which we're happy to be a part of. And let's be proud to be Canadians out there in the world market where we're well respected, where we've been traders forever. We have to be. We can't consume everything we produce. And we have very good people out there selling our products. So, I mean, I'm positive. I think all this will end up, hopefully, being the wake-up call we needed.
So overall, a good vibes, good mission, good trade mission, which is that's always a good thing anyway.
Well, absolutely. Anytime we take our companies out into the world, it's a good thing. And we get very good support from the federal and provincial governments who funded all of the activities that we did there. The private companies pay their own travel, but our governments put the money up to hire the consultants and the meeting spaces and the experts to tell us what's happening in these markets. So that's very helpful. So no, I'm positive about it, and we'll continue to push and push more money that we can into trade development, into marketing. I mean, we're way behind the rest of the world in terms of what they invest. Our biggest competitors in Norway and America, they spend a lot more money than we do. So I'm going to be pushing hard for more investment in trade development.
Okay, Jeff, appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Okay, Todd. Thank you.
All right, take care. Jeff Irvine, Executive Director of the Lobster Council of Canada. Federal workers raise concerns with the Phoenix pay system replacement. That when we come back. All right, federal workers raise concerns with the Phoenix pay system replacement. Joining us to discuss all of this is Chris DeLibertore, Regional Executive Vice President with PSAC Atlanta. Chris, thanks for doing the show today. We appreciate your time.
Happy to be here, Todd.
All right, so the Phoenix pay system, the much beleaguered Phoenix pay system, give everybody, I think, a quick history lesson on that first before we get to some of the new developments. I think it's important that people get some of the background.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been 9 years. The anniversary is coming up, February 28th, that the government implemented the Phoenix pay system. 9 years and $3 billion later, and our members are still having issues with pay transactions. Right now, there's a backlog of pay transaction errors of 383,000 cases. More than half of those are more than a year old, and some of those are even older than 5 years. We've had members, as folks would recall, who haven't been paid at all, underpaid, overpaid, and it just continues to this day. I mean, even now, every single pay, there's 26% of pay transactions on any given pay period that aren't processed within the service standards. Whoa. So we've been waiting for a long time for the government to do what's necessary to make sure that our members are paid correctly and on time. Each and every payday. You would think that would be the most basic of rights that our members would be entitled to, is to receive the pay that they've earned for the work that they've completed. But like I say, we're 9 years later, and this isn't all on. I want to be clear. This is not all on the current government. This was initiated by the previous government. And all the system that was selected by the previous government, and all through that time we were saying, folks, you need to consult with us because there are problems here, and they just wouldn't listen, and that's continuing even today. We're trying to consult with them on this new system that we're looking at, Dayforce, and they still continue to lack that real meaningful consultation. There's been some testing that's gone on, as you may be aware of. But our members are quite concerned with what they've seen through these testing sessions that have taken place.
I want to get to the testing sessions in a sec, but is there a parallel to this or another example of a pay problem like this anywhere else in the private sector, or are there any other examples, or is this kind of standalone?
No, this is not standalone because the Australian government faced the exact same issues with this exact same system before it was implemented here in Canada.
Well, there you go. So might as well, since they've had such a horrible experience, we might as well have the same one, right?
It seems that way.
Good Lord. Okay, tell us about Dayforce.
So as we've been talking about, there is this new system that is being tested right now called Dayforce. They've been doing a bit of a road show to demonstrate the capabilities with some of our members, but a significant number of our members didn't even know these testing sessions were happening because the employer failed to promote it widely, or I don't know if there was some kind of an effort that they needed to do something to ensure some kind of meaningful participation. But we had 2,500 members who attended these sessions complete a survey, and 60% of those folks said they weren't even aware of the session until we sent out the survey that had some of the additional dates. So this testing that's gone on, and to be clear, this system that they're testing, all indications are that it's 6 to 7 years away before it's going to be implemented. So we're going to be stuck with Phoenix for that period of time. With the testing that's taken place, the people that have participated, they said it was really basic and it didn't really address any of the real issues that our members face when they're accessing their payroll information. The menus, even when they were in there, it wasn't clear. They couldn't find what it was they were looking for. Our compensation advisors, the people that work at the pay center in Miramichi, our members, the experts in operating these pay systems were so frustrated they couldn't test pay calculations. They couldn't get any access to any real data that would give them any kind of comfort that Dayforce could handle the complex payroll scenarios that we deal with as a result of the 80,000 different payrolls that are within the federal government. So with all of this, the risk of repeating Phoenix is very real to some of these folks. They really feel that right now they're not certain Dayforce will be able to do what it's needed to do, and that we may be repeating the same problems rather than solving them.
All right, is Dayforce, is that a Canadian company? Who owns Dayforce?
Ceridian is the company that's developing that.
And where are they from?
I believe they're here in Canada.
Here in Canada. Okay.
I'm not certain that's not information that I have as to where exactly their ownership is. I would certainly hope, considering everything that's going on, that they are, but I really don't have that information.
Okay, what are some early warning signs here that this might not be what it as advertised?
Well, as I said, like with the compensation advisors, the fact that they're frustrated, that they don't have the confidence, and again, these are the folks that deal with Phoenix on a day-to-day basis and know the issues of Phoenix, and they're not really being able to see that the system is making the appropriate calculations. There's just a lot of concern, and even when the trainers were there delivering these sessions to provide this demonstration, I remember said that it felt very scripted, and that there was no real system information of how this would work in the real world.
It's hard to believe that that after all that we've gone through and all of the money wasted, that they wouldn't make sure that they get the second one absolutely nailed. To me, that blows my mind.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, this is why we continue to say you need to work with us. We have the expertise. We have the compensation advisors that can help point out the things that they need to make the system work properly. Our friends with the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada, PIPS. They have the IT folks, and they've said from day one that their members have the expertise to actually build one of these systems. So why not build it in-house instead of contracting out? Because here we are again contracting out services, and it's costing us and taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. And we're not in this system. We're not sure if it's going to meet the necessary capabilities. But in the old system, we already know that it's failed. But we continue to throw money at them for fixes that aren't there. What we need is for this government to invest in additional compensation advisors to stabilize the current system, so that between now and when they get this new system running to a point where it will avoid any of the failures of Phoenix, that our folks are able to minimize the number of incorrect pay transactions that take place, and are able to make sure that folks are getting paid accurately and on time each and every payday.
And I can't imagine the frustration level. It just must be beyond belief here for so many of your members.
Well, that's just it, and that's why we're still continuing to call for additional damages. I mean, back in 2020, we had negotiated general damages for our members because of the stress and anxiety that's been caused by Phoenix, and here we are, another 4 or 5 years later, and it's still no better. So that's, again, we're continuing to negotiate with the government, trying to negotiate additional damages for the members for exactly that, and for those folks who have been extremely challenged by this or affected by this. There will be additional measures for those folks to make sure that they're made whole.
Okay, listen, Chris, appreciate your time. I know it's very frustrating, but we'll continue to stay on top of it. Thanks for your time, of course.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
All right, take care. Chris DeLibator, Regional Executive Vice President, PSAC Atlantic. Federal government considers contract retaliation as Trump promises tariffs. Moshe Lander when we come back. All right, joining us for a chat is Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. Moshe, thanks for joining the show.
Hello.
All right, so the federal government considers contract retaliation as Trump promises tariffs. This is one of the latest developments in all of this. The federal government's looking closely at business it does with American companies as it considers ways to push back against Trump's tariff threats. How much of an impact might this be, or is this kind of tokenism, I guess?
It's tokenism. It's not going to have much of an impact. There's not enough numbers there that it's going to make a dent in the U.S. economy. We have to remember that where our GDP is around $2 trillion, give or take, the American economy is around $30 trillion. So when we're talking about something that might have an impact on Canada, let's say that it's 1% of our GDP, that means that it's less than 0.1% of their GDP. So it becomes a rounding error. And of course, it's not that the business that we're doing is with the U.S. government. We're doing business with U.S. companies. So we're going to inflict damage on companies that probably don't want these tariffs because they recognize what they stand to lose. So it isn't even really going to register with the U.S. government itself.
Okay, so is it worthwhile doing?
Probably not, but I understand that, again, we're struggling for, well, how are we going to get them to notice? If we're not going to turn out the lights and cut the power on them, then we're just looking for things that will raise heads. I think that the patriotism that's starting to surface in Canada, while patriotism is not necessarily a bad thing, it's a bit of a problem in that these actions don't register with the U.S. We've seen, for example, like booing at hockey games, just encourages retaliation on their part because they don't understand why we're doing it. I think that if the Canadian government really wanted to try and register with the U.S., it's now going after, say, the U.S. consumer with advertising campaigns. Show them why they need Canada. Show them that we are powering their homes or the goods and services that they are getting from us or all of the sitcoms that they love that come out of Canada, that they are Canadian. And those types of things that, you can spend that money effectively and trying to rally consumer support, targeting businesses that have nothing to do with these tariffs. Or targeting states that might have nothing to do with these tariffs can end up being a known goal.
All right, withholding energy supplies, whatever it might be, whether it be just straight up oil and gas or whether it be diesel or hydropower, is that something that, that's a tough ask for the communities and the people that make their living in those industries. Because if we do that, then that means they have to cut production, and that impacts people's lives and jobs in the here and now in Canada. That's a big ask, right?
You're right, and it's not quite different from an act of war. That's what Russia has done for years to Europe, Ukraine, and most recently, where when they don't get their way or when they want to try and create conflict or get their attention, they just cut off the gas. And so it's not very Canadian of us to do that. And for those that say, well, maybe we need to take a more aggressive stance, again, we're harming the wrong people. It's going after U.S. consumers is merely going to cause those consumers to rally to Trump's side, where he says, that's why we need to go get Canada. That's why I've been telling you that they are nasty people. We're playing into their hands. Again, highlighting the importance of our relationship, why it's worked, what benefits U.S. consumers get, what benefits U.S. businesses get, is much more appropriate, and for a fraction of the cost. And the other part of it, too, is that to the original idea of cutting off government contracts, you need something to replace it. And that's part of the missing part, too, with the Buy Canadian movement, is if you're going to buy Canadian, in some cases those goods were already here, and we chose not to buy them when they were available to us because we preferred the American goods. And in some cases, the Canadian good can't replace it. We just won't have a thriving orange growing industry, no matter how much we want it. In some cases, those government contracts aren't going to be replaced by Canadian companies because maybe Canadian companies can't provide those services to begin with. And so then what damage are we inflicting on ourselves?
Okay, so these types of things, they ebb and flow, and in the public discourse, they ebb and flow, and I kind of get the feeling that it's not as heated of an issue right now for whatever reason. I don't know if it's just because the tariffs haven't happened yet, or if people just exhaust themselves of talking about it. But where do you think this sits right now when it comes to Canadians and concerns and with the average public right now?
Look, they're legit concerns. Trump wants to upend 80 years of the economic world order. Since the Second World War, the move has been towards deeper integration, more economic interdependence, less tariffs, less barriers, and he's looking to destroy that the way that he's looked to destroy a lot of the existing American order globally and even internally. So consumers are right to be afraid. I think right now we're looking around for, well, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen? But sometimes when you end up getting distracted with those things, that's the type of thing that can be a drag on productivity. It's the type of thing that can be a drag on our health, increased stress and things like that. And so that becomes a drag on the economy itself. And we could very easily tip from a mild recession into a deeper recession, even without the tariffs. And I kind of think that's what Trump is looking to do here. That's why he keeps giving us a reprieve and pushing things back, is he's maybe not really looking to put the tariffs on us. He just wants to keep us in the state of anxiety. And that itself will do enough economic damage that the Canadian dollar has softened and the economy is weakening, unemployment is rising. Your news story before I came on was talking about how inflation has ticked up. These are all the types of things then that have happened even without the tariffs. So if you just say, I'll give you another chance, I'll give you another chance, I'll give you another chance, but I might bring them in, he's just crazy enough that keeps everybody on edge.
All right. So how long can we stay on that yo-yo train?
Yeah, that's the thing, is that, we could convince ourselves, well, he only has 4 years. At that point, then maybe things go back to normal. But then again, maybe he tries to cling to power, or maybe the person that comes after him uses this as the playbook. So I think what you're going to start to see is that Canadian businesses are going to realize that, all right, maybe what we've taken for granted for the last 80 years is not something that we can trust. And maybe we have to look for new trade partners, broadening our supply chains, removing interprovincial barriers, and trying to create then a system where if the U.S. is on our side, fantastic. And if they're not on our side, it's not the end of the world. We've spent too long relying on they're always going to be our best friends, and maybe now it's going to be situational. And I think as businesses start to reimagine then what we do, that's going to dictate the path going forward that will allow us to maybe escape some of the real pressure that we're finding right now, that we maybe put too much of our eggs in one basket.
All right, a lot of talk about interprovincial trade barriers and removing interprovincial trade barriers, but is that necessarily, does that benefit every province, or would there be winners and losers out of that deal as well?
Great point, Todd. There's always winners and losers. By taking no action, there's winners and losers. By taking action, there's winners and losers. What I can tell you for sure is that anytime you move towards freer trade, whether that's at the country level or whether that's at the provincial level, the gains of the winners will always exceed the losses of the losers. So that means it's a net benefit to society. The role of government then is to make sure that the gains of the winners are redistributed at minimum to compensate the losers. There would still be money left over, though. And then we can talk through the political process about how we want to share out those net gains. But by not taking action, in this case, the people who are winning, their gains are not greater than the people who are losing. And so society is worse off as a result. It's holding back our economy by about $200 billion. And when I said that our economy is $2 trillion, that's a pretty sizable chunk of money that's being left on the table because we're protecting these vested interests. I understand politically nobody wants to take on those vested interests, but somebody has to come along and realize that maybe now is the time to do it because Canadians are united, that we're worried about the state of our economy, and this might be the type of necessary intervention to try and push things forward.
Are you into what can we look to next, I guess, when it comes to this? What are you anticipating happens next? What's the next thing that might fall?
Well, I think that Trump is going to come back to the table and ask for something else from Canada. So the original text that got everybody into a tizzy was, he said, until you stop fentanyl and immigrants crossing the northern border, I'm putting tariffs on. And so Canada quickly moved to appoint a fentanyl czar and to try and tighten up border security. Trump's already started to hint at the things that he doesn't like about the Canadian economy. And so this might be what gets us another 30-day extension or a 60-day extension or a cancellation entirely. He's upset about the asymmetry within the banking sector. Our banks operate there, but their banks can't operate here. He's upset about the support that goes for dairy farmers in this country and some of the protected interests that keep American firms from competing. And so if he comes back and says, all right, I want you to start doing these things to open up your economy, in a weird way, that's actually encouraging free trade. And so it might be worth considering. And if he's the impetus, that's not the worst thing that could happen. But I have a feeling that we're going to constantly be dealing with increase your defense spending or the tariffs are coming. Remove the barriers or the tariffs are coming. And it's always going to be whatever it is that he wants, we give in to him. It's just how long can we withstand it or how much damage do we want to inflict ourselves, like Stephen Harper was saying, to make sure that we continue to determine our own path, not the path of the president.
Moshe, always great. Thanks so much. We'll do it again.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Moshe Lander, economist with Montreal's Concordia University. Politics with Lori Turnbull when we come back. Lori Turnbull joins us, Dalhousie University political science professor. Lori, thanks for joining the show. As always, we appreciate your time.
Anytime, Todd. Thanks for having me.
All right, you got it. So Pierre Poilievre is sticking with Axe the Tax. He believes that slogan has gotten him where he is today, and it'll take him where he hopes to go. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't disagree that it's helped to get him where he is. I think, and I can see why. Like he's got this Axe the Tax, and everybody cheers, and there's like he's built that brand and that logo as part of it. And this isn't just about politics. This is a marketing thing, right? Like when you build that up, it's hard to then just drop that symbolism and move on to something else. I think what he's going to do now is keep the Axe the Tax slogan and pivot from the carbon tax to say he's going to put tax cuts on other things. And this is a way of addressing the economic implications of a potential trade war with the U.S.
But I think when people hear Axe the Tax, they defer to carbon tax, do they not?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, part of I think why the Axe the Tax slogan worked was that it wasn't specific. Like it didn't say Axe the carbon tax, it said Axe the Tax. And who doesn't want to Axe the Tax? Yeah. And so when you say that, it can generate some support, even if people aren't totally thinking about one singular thing. And so, I mean, we'll see if it works. Like, I think he wants to go at Mark Carney for continuing with like a corporate carbon tax, and he'll argue that that'll be passed on to the people anyway.
The carbon tax Carney, I mean, that's not going anywhere either, I wouldn't dare say, right?
No. I think that like this is all changed now with Trudeau leaving, Carney coming in, and the Trump situation. Like those three factors have, I think, kind of force the Conservatives to have to pivot. And I know a lot of them are saying, no, we're not pivoting. Well, yeah, I think you are. I think you're coming up with, like, they have to. They have to figure out if their opponent is not Trudeau and they're not able to define Carney as Trudeau 2.0, then they have to come up with a new strategy against Carney. And I think Carney's credentials are so relevant in the Trump situation that even if people aren't going to ultimately vote for Carney, I mean, they're going to look at him. They're going to look at what is he bringing to the table. And so Poilievre and the Conservatives kind of have to go back to the drawing board a bit.
Okay, some of the other slogans: fix the budget, stop the crime. Some of these other things that they've gone with. Is there any danger in keeping those, or is there any danger in dropping some of those?
Well, I mean, stuff like the housing crisis, that's still here. Like, even though we're now super worried about what's going to happen economically, I mean, building the homes is still really important and could, be even more complicated because of the disruptions that could occur in our back and forth with the U.S. And so I think that stands. Everybody wants to fix the crime. Those sorts of things, like, I don't think he necessarily has to pivot from those things, but the one thing I do think, he's got two issues. One is he can't keep saying that Canada's broken, because people don't want to hear that when there's a kind of resurgence in patriotism and sense of national attachment. It doesn't mean that people don't know that there are problems. It just means it's hard to get up and talk about Canada's broken when we're vulnerable right now to threats from Trump. So that's one thing. To the extent that those other slogans feed into that Canada is broken narrative, I think they have to pivot from that. The other thing is that he runs the risk of proximity to Trump, which could cut him in different ways, right? Which would cut different ways. There's a part of Poilievre's base that doesn't necessarily feel any bother by being aligned with Donald Trump. There are Trump supporters in Canada. But there are also a lot of people who were willing to gravitate to Poilievre because they didn't like Trudeau, who are repulsed by Trump, and even are more so now. And so I think that's where Poilievre, too, has to figure out how he's going to put together that winning constituency, because he was doing it on the basis of people just being tired of Trudeau and really feeling like Trudeau was responsible for a lot of what's wrong. But now, in order to win the election, he's got to keep some of those moderate voters, people who typically don't vote Conservative. Like, the Conservative base isn't enough to win it for him.
Right. The things like stop the crime. This is something that, look, he has to be careful, because if he abandons too many of these things, then he'll lose some of that key base support, right? And you can't do that. So is there a way to unapologetically kind of say, listen, we believe in these things and we're sticking with them?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It's all in the way it's pitched. Like, I mean, again, like, building the houses and balancing the budget, like, Carney's saying he's going to balance the operational budget. Right. And so those messages aren't necessarily polarizing. It's just that I think they know, right? Like, they need a new get up, given the fact that they're now running against a new competitor in a totally different environment. Because 2 months ago, people didn't necessarily think that this whole situation with the U.S. was going to play out the way it was. And definitely prior to the election, we didn't know that this was all going to be the case, right? And so now, because the backdrop of the whole thing is different, because the ballot question is different, Poilievre has to show up differently too.
Yeah, for sure. And what about calling out or calling out Trump in particular, or personally, or Trump attacks? Is that something that you have to be very careful of? That's difficult territory to tread, I would think, right?
Yeah, I think so, because, I mean, on the one hand, Poilievre wants to show, like, and I think he is, right? Like, he's Canada first. He's been vocal about wanting to retaliate with dollar-for-dollar tariffs. Like, he has advocated taking a tough stance with the U.S., and he's talking about Canada first. So I'm not suggesting on one level, that Poilievre is somehow looking to be soft with Trump. But if he starts lashing out at Trump, and then Trump and Elon Musk start lashing back, like they did with Trudeau, that might not help, right? Because it might look like then Trump doesn't respect Poilievre, and maybe Poilievre isn't the right person to deal with him. Right. Whereas Carney seems to be playing a different kind of game, because he's not a politician. He's somebody who's made his career somewhere else.
Okay, on the Liberal leadership, we've got, let's see now, how many people? 5 is there? I think it's 5, yeah. Okay. So of the 5, who would be the least likely to win this thing?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I have to think someone like Ruby Dalla came in at the last minute, hasn't really been a figure in the Liberal, like she was a Liberal MP before, but not a name that you hear associated with the Liberals all the time. Frank Baylis was a one-time MP from Quebec. I think they're both quite well networked and easily came up with a $350,000 entry fee, easily came up with a lot of people to sign up as members. Yeah. But at the same time, aren't necessarily carrying the kind of gravitas with the whole party. The name recognition for those candidates isn't going to be as big. Karina Gould and Chrystia Freeland were both cabinet ministers very recently, and so they've got more name recognition and probably have more pull with the membership. But these things are so weird. It all depends on how many people you sign up. And so the ground game of the candidates is going to be what determines what that ballot looks like. That said, I think Carney's going to win this on the first ballot.
Is that a good thing to have a first ballot win? I suppose some would say that it's convincing and that it shows conviction for the party and solidarity, perhaps?
Yes, I think in this case, 100%, the more votes for a singular person, whether it's Carney or not. I mean, given what Carney is doing in terms of fundraising, you've seen the polls as much as I have, right? Yeah. He starts changing the game. So I don't know why on earth they'd go with anybody else, frankly, because they're not in this because they want to. They're in this because they had to make a change to the leadership, and the best case scenario is for them to come out with somebody with a strong mandate who's able to change things, and he's demonstrated that he can. So splitting the ballot at this point, I don't see where the strength in that is for anybody, except the Conservatives.
Yeah. Lori, always great. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political science professor. Now it's time for you. What is on your mind today? Give us a call, 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, time for your calls. Way to reach us, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today on this Tuesday after a long weekend? Again, 902-405-6000. I guess started out a little light. Perhaps Canada's punched its ticket to the Four Nations Face-Off Championship. The team will face the United States Thursday in Boston after beating Finland yesterday 5-3. And a pretty convincing win. The finals will be a rematch after the U.S. beat Canada 3-1 in a fight-filled, emotionally charged game Saturday in Montreal. I guess the pretty simple question is, are you watching this tournament? Do you care about this tournament? And what do you think about this tournament? I used to be a massive, massive fan of international hockey. Absolutely loved it. Got really excited when I was a kid for the Canada Cups and all international hockey. Of course, the Olympics when I was a kid, Canada didn't fare very well, rarely medaled, if at all, because of the best of the best weren't there. The NHL players didn't play when I was young. I think it was Salt Lake City. It was Japan. I believe it was, yes, Japan. The first time that, in my lifetime, that NHL players played. Of course, that was the year that Gretzky didn't play and didn't get the nod in the shootout, and Canada lost to the Czechs, I believe it was. Dominik Hasek, I think, was the goalie that stopped them. Anyway, are you watching this? And is it interesting? And do you think it's good hockey? And what are your thoughts on it? I guess just something light, perhaps, for sports fans out there. Also, of course, just chatted with Lori Turnbull, Dalhousie University political science professor, talked politics. The Conservatives' favorite slogan, "Axe the tax," is remaining. They are keeping this as their rallying cry. They feel it's applicable. Pierre Poilievre said over the weekend he put speculation to rest, said after much reflection, I've concluded that the carbon tax will be an even bigger issue in the coming election. So is it an election issue for you? Does it remain important to you, despite the fact that the Liberals, Mark Carney, of course, Chrystia Freeland, and I think all the candidates have said that they would end the consumer-facing carbon tax and go to something different. Is it still an election issue for you? Is Axe the Tax still resonate? Do you think that this will get it done for the Conservatives? What are your thoughts on that? How about what's going on with the Liberals and their leadership bid? It's come down to 5 at this point. Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Frank Bayless, Ruby Dalla, and Karina Gould have all made their final payments. Carney's campaign boasted over the weekend it had raised a whopping $1.9 million so far. Do you have a favorite? Is there any that stands out for you? And have you supported perhaps the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre and moved and changed your mind as a result of what you're hearing from the Liberals, or no? Where are you, or do you even care about any of this stuff? And, of course, what's going on in the United States with the Trump administration. And, look, folks, it's downright scary in a lot of ways when you look at what's happening in the United States. Imagine, if you will, a scenario where the next Liberal or the next federal government, whichever iteration it is, the Liberals or the Conservatives or even the NDP or whatever, let's suggest that the Pierre Poilievre won the next election. And let's say that he appointed some billionaire to head up a newfound department similar to Doge. And that department systematically, within the first weeks of being in power, went in and axed the public sector en masse. Just completely gutted the public sector without consulting Parliament, Senate, or whatever it might be. Can you imagine the outcry that would happen in this country? Could that even happen? Would that even happen? And some of you might think that it should happen. I certainly didn't. I certainly am not amongst those. I'm not saying that there's not waste in the federal public sector, and not only in Canada, certainly in the United States. I'm sure that we know that there's plenty of waste. But that all said, the approach, you have to be more, in my opinion, more systematic, more humane, as a matter of fact. I mean, you can't just axe arbitrarily thousands of workers, displacing people, throwing them out of work. And what are the repercussions of that and the services that they provide? And without thinking this through, it's really, really insane what's going on when it comes to Doge in the United States, and the fact that Elon Musk is the guy in charge of this. Again, with given arbitrary powers, seemingly unlimited powers, somebody who is a billionaire, multi-billionaire, the richest man on earth. Hard to believe. So what are we witnessing in the United States? Does it concern you? And it should concern you. And what are your thoughts on the ongoing trade war, which isn't going away anytime soon, folks? We're in a holding pattern. And if, in fact, if it plays out the way that Trump is promising that it's going to play out, it's going to have a devastating impact on our economies. Are we pivoting? Are we preparing for it? And, of course, our own provincial legislature opened last week with a throne speech. And there's budgetary items being tabled today. 902-405-6000. Give us a call. What's on your mind? Again, 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with Eric. Hello, Eric.
Hey, good morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Not too bad. Well, yes, I'm watching the games with a lot of interest. And I think there's two people that are going to determine this game. Hellebuck, the guy for the goaltender for the States, and, of course, Crosby, the main man for the Canadians. I'm a little bit concerned, or a little bit. I like to know what's in Marchand's head on Thursday, because he plays for Boston. He lives in Canada. I think he might have something to say about this too. I don't know how you feel about it. Your buddy there, Blake, says he's going with Canada, but Canada can't afford to let the States back in like they did to the game yesterday. I mean, they're up 1 minute, and the next minute they're down by one. They're up by one goal. So I don't think they can allow the States to have the freedom that they did to the team that played yesterday.
Well, I mean, look, I think when it comes to the States and Canada, they're pretty equal, right? I think if you looked at talent per talent, line by line, if you looked at the production in the NHL, you're looking at a couple of pretty balanced teams there. I think it could go either way. Let's face it.
Yeah, well, we shall see. But like I say, I'm interested to see how Marchand will approach this game. Like I say, he plays for Boston and he lives in Canada.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be a bit surprised that he has something to say about that game too.
He's certainly going to want to. Yeah, for sure. He will definitely want to bring his best game of his lifetime. He's playing in front of his home fans, and like you said, it's odd. I always find it odd when you have a player like Marchand, who you typically who anybody who plays against him or fans of the opposing team don't like him. You almost have disdain for Marchand. But when he's wearing your jersey, it's hard not to like the guy, don't you find?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean he's a go-getter. He reminds me of when Kenny Linsman used to play. He was a little rat, like he would start something and then he would skate away. That's the way I see Marchand in his style of playing. And I know it's going to be a barn burner, but my God, you gotta find a way to beat Hellebuck. I mean, Winnipeg Jets are sitting on top of in the NHL, and the reason why they're sitting on top is because of the goaltender. So it's going to come down to Hellebuck and Crosby, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate the call. Take care.
Bye.
All right. 902-405-6000. Dave, you want to talk about the hockey and Canada-U.S. game? Go ahead.
Yes, I would. I really enjoying the rivalry. I haven't been much interested in international hockey, to say the least, really. We had a tremendous rivalry, not the U.S., but between the Soviet Union and Russia. And we all just couldn't wait to get to the TVs and watch that tremendous rivalry, hated rivalry, over the years. And then it kind of went, not a lot going on. But that game the other night in Montreal, it had a lot of spirit in it. And I think booing, which, again, is arguable. I don't think it was a good thing. We should have showed our class, but we did not. We're talking Montreal, too, and they're known to do booing a fair bit if they're displeased. And I think that just, set a light or fire under the United States players. I don't know if they're aware of what's going on. Let's face it, everybody knows what's going on about this, especially if you're Canadian, around social media, Todd. Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys, when they're done, they're on their phones, they're on social media, blah, blah, blah. So how can we not know what's going on with the U.S. and Canada right now? So I think, honestly, I like good old-fashioned hockey, and when those fights broke out, I think there was 3 within 9 seconds, that really set the tone. It really did, and they were toe-to-toe, fights. And again, I'm not too sure if I'm approving of fighting, but let that energy out. And I think that set the pace. And I think Thursday's going to be a barn burner. It really is.
It should be a good game. I'll definitely watch it. I don't tune into a whole lot of hockey anymore. I watch some hockey, but I think it's going to be a game worth watching for sure. I don't know how much. Dave. I don't know how much the players know what's going on when it comes to tariffs or how much they care. I mean, these guys live pretty isolated lives away from politics and all of this stuff. And no matter what, their lives are going to be pretty freaking good. But that said, I think that they get caught up in the moment for sure. I think that was on display, which is good.
So do you think the rivalry, and I'll even say a little bit of hatred there on the ice? I mean, when you're trying to knock the socks off of somebody else, break their nose, whatever, you're not going in there just pussing around. You're throwing Hail Marys, and there's not a lot of love lost there. So I think it's not a bad thing. I think of course I want to see our Canadian team pull out because we'll see how deep they can dig to win this thing, because there's a lot of pressure on both sides. And by the way, I do listen to a lot of sports after on the weekend. U.S. sports comes on your station, and They know what's going on. There's not a lot going on in sports in general, basketball. Everything's shut down. Baseball starting up, spring league, whatever, or training. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot going on. So hockey is it, and they are a buzz down there. I can tell you that much. I mean, hockey right now is huge in the States, especially that part of the region in New England and what have you, right? Yeah, it's a buzz.
Okay, Dave. Thanks for the call, pal. Take care. All right, 902-405-6000. We've got open lines for you, folks. Give us a call. What would you like to get into today? 902-405-6000. Are you watching this Four Nations Face-Off Championship? Certainly, you can continue to talk politics. Pierre Poilievre axed the tax. Does that resonate with you? He's going to stick with the slogan with that. It's got him a long way. It's kept him in the polls for a couple of years, way ahead in the polls. Will it continue to work? What are your thoughts on the Liberals, Mark Carney, or whatever else you've got in your mind? 902-405-6000. Open lines for you, folks. We'll be back. Continuing with your calls, open lines for you folks. Give us a call, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Again, lots and lots to talk about, but one of the things that I'm asking people about is, are you watching the Four Nations Face-Off Championship? Has this caught your attention at all? A pretty exciting hockey, of course. Boston, or rather, I shouldn't say Boston, in Montreal on Saturday night. It was a rough tumble affair, typical kind of North American hockey with three fights in the first 9 seconds or 11 seconds or something like that. People call that passionate. Did you like that? Is that something that you thought was pretty exciting, or would you rather just see them play hockey? Also, the booing question continues. Do you like the fact that some booed the Star-Spangled Banner? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, or anything else that you've got in your mind? Of course, you can get into other things as well, including the politics here in this country. Axe the tax. Does that slogan, does that campaign continue to resonate with you? Because Pierre Poilievre is betting that it does and will. He's going to continue with it. I've said on this show before that it appears as though axe the tax has been neutered because the Liberals have axed the consumer-facing carbon tax, but they certainly have not abandoned the carbon tax as an entity or as an idea, that's for sure. As Mark Carney said that he will introduce a different form of a carbon tax, just not one that people see at the pump. And of course, we've had a carbon tax here in Nova Scotia before this version of it, and it was called cap and trade. And nobody said boo about it. Not a word was ever said about the carbon tax until it became something that you saw at the pump. So what are your thoughts on what's happening federally and of course with the Liberals and Mark Carney? Do you like Mark Carney? It appears as though he is going to be coronated as the winner of the Liberal leadership, although they have 5 people competing for the job, including others: Chrystia Freeland, Frank Bayless, Ruby Dalla, Karina Gould. 902-405-6000. Couple of emails and back to the phones. Let's see. Mark says it was disgraceful to watch the Montreal fans boo the Americans and how much class the Boston fans had during the Canadian anthem. Also, I heard that the Kachuk brothers had a plan prior to the game to start the fighting incidents to stand up for their country. This whole thing is a bad look for Canada. I hope we are better than that. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. All right, let's go back to the phones. And haven't heard from Nora in a while, but Nora, you want to talk hockey? Go ahead.
Okay. How are you?
Well.
Good. Yeah, I was just thinking, Eric, a little while ago, said that Crosby could dictate that game on Thursday.
Yeah.
Well, there's always McDavid or McKinnon could as well, so...
Well, I mean, listen, I love Sid Crosby. Everybody loves Sid Crosby, but let's face it, he's a step behind these other players at this stage of the game. Not to take away, I mean, look, I'm not saying he shouldn't be on the team, by the way. I think he should be on the team. I'm glad he's the captain. But when you look at what Connor McDavid can do out there and some of these other players and the speed and the way in which they play the game, I think Sidney Crosby, he looks 37 or 38 or whatever he is at this stage, which is okay.
Yeah, but it's been pretty good hockey.
No, I'm not suggesting it's not been good hockey. I'm just saying Sidney Crosby is no longer the class of I shouldn't say class. He's no longer the best player on the ice. Not even close, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you there, for sure. But I wonder why they're waiting so long to play that game.
Till Thursday?
Till Thursday.
To hype it up. It's only Tuesday, right? They want to get some hype. They want to get some. I would say it's about hype.
Because it's a pretty quick turnaround when the NHL starts like 2 days later.
Yeah, well, I get it, but I think it's probably just to develop some hype. It's gonna be an interesting game. Look, I'm gonna watch it. I don't tune into. I don't make a point to watch a lot of hockey anymore, except outside of the playoffs when the Leafs are in the playoffs and they're not and they don't stay in the playoffs for very long. So, but
so you're done in like yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Just don't pick them to win. They might win.
No, I'm not picking anybody. Look, when it comes to the U.S. and Canada, these teams are as equally matched as you'll ever see, and it's anybody's game.
Yeah. That's true. We'll have to wait and see. But...
Okay, Nora. Thanks for the call.
Okay, thanks.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Rob, hello.
Hey, Todd. How you doing?
Well, you?
Pretty good. I haven't talked to you in a while. I've been busy. But as far as Carney goes, I mean, whatever type of carbon tax, you have a feeling that it's going to still be passed down to the end user, so the consumer, right? Our household is supporting Poilievre. I believe that really most of what he was saying in his speech, I think it was on Saturday, was pretty much the same. As far as the border, immigration, the military, crime.
Yeah.
I mean, he mentioned about the $2 billion going to buy back firearms from legal hunters and sport shooters. He mentioned he'd like to divert that couple of billion. He said this a while back to give it to CBSA so they can buy scanners to start looking into some of these containers that are coming in and leaving the country. I don't really see, the media seems to say, well, hey, he's got this big pivot. But I think a lot of it's just what a lot of people say he's only axed the tax. I don't think, I heard a lot more from him months and years ago that was more than just axe the tax. I think he cares about the country, and I'm going to support him for sure.
I think, Rob, what really is taking the wind out of his sails, though, is that Trudeau is no longer his target, because Trudeau, look, there was a lot of Trudeau hate out there, and people had their fill of Trudeau, and the fact that he's no longer the guy, I think that takes some wind out of his sails, no matter how you crack it up. That's just my belief.
Yeah, hopefully he'll adjust, and I think Carney, I mean, it just seems like, I don't know, is he the new iPhone? Everybody's kind of run out, and after you have it, you realize, it's not much different than the last phone I had.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't, is he another, WEF, rich, elite lefty that's going to solve all our problems? I don't know. I don't, but I'm not, I'm willing to support, I won't vote Liberal. No way. There's no way in heck I'm going to vote Liberal. To vote for Carney, you're going to have to vote for some of these MPs that haven't done a whole lot. They just stood behind Trudeau, and that was that. And they didn't really do a lot for us. So to put him in power, a lot of them are gone now, but some of them are going to still be there. You'd have to vote for those MPs to support Carney. Right. I'm not going to do it, but hey, everybody's got to do what makes them feel good, I guess.
Okay, thanks for the call, Rob.
Yeah.
Take care, pal. 902-405-6000. Got open lines for you, folks. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz again, 902-405-6000. So Gary says this, it's amazing how people hear what they think they want to hear, right? He says, so Crosby is a step behind and can't keep up? That's not what I said, Gary. I didn't say he can't keep up. I said he's the captain, he should be the captain, and he plays well, and he contributes, and is, but what I did say is that he's no longer the fastest player on the ice or the most impactful, dynamic player on the ice. He's not. He's not the best player out there anymore. That's what I said. I said he's the captain. He should be the captain. He's played well. He contributes. But he's not the explosive Connor McDavid type player that is out there anymore. He's not that guy. Yes, he plays well. That's all I said. I didn't say he's a step behind and can't keep up. I said he's no longer the best player on the ice, and he's not. Okay? Yes, he sets up goals, and he scored a goal himself, and he contributes, and should be there, and should wear the C. That's what I said. But he's not the best player on the team anymore. That's all I said. And I stand by that. Wow. People get so upset. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Kevin, hello.
Good morning. How are you doing, Todd?
I'm well, you?
Good. I listened to the last caller and it motivated me to call in, comparing Trudeau to Carney. I mean, look at their resume. I always try to tell people, imagine if you had a son and he had a resume like Trudeau, and he ended up becoming the Prime Minister of Canada. Somebody that was spoiled as a child, went to the best schools. I don't think he had any other job but a part-time drama school teacher. He might have had something, but I don't know about it. And he ended up running our country for 12 years. He had no resume. This Carney fella has got an amazing resume. He's had support in the past from the Conservative Party. You can't compare these two guys at all. And if anybody's going to stand up for what's happening in Canada, it's going to be this fella. I mean, there's just no other choice. I'd like to see Poilievre to have a chance too, but he's not ready. He's not ready. He doesn't sound good. He doesn't motivate people. He's just not ready. Now, he might be ready, but I don't feel it, and I think Canadians need to feel it now. And throughout everywhere I go now, Canadians are more pride and more, awareness of how lucky we are, and they're standing up. And like I was supposed to go golfing in Arizona for a month. The day before it, I canceled it. I was going to buy a Tesla. I lost a $250 deposit because I'm not going to follow Elon Musk right now. And there's a lot of Canadians that are doing the same thing, and it makes me really proud to be a Canadian. There's so much noise, and that's all it is noise. We're going to survive this. We're going to come out of it. We're going to have some challenges, and we're going to do damn well. And if there's anybody in politics that can do it other than Doug Ford, I think he's impressed the hell out of me lately, too. But if there's anybody that can do anything, this Carney fella. The only thing I wish was Art Carney might have a little bit more humor around listening to it.
Okay, Kevin, let me ask you this question about Mark Carney, because some would suggest that he's not connected to, but certainly has an affiliation with the World Economic Forum and is a carbon tax guy and has been a strong proponent of carbon taxation. Does any of that concern you at all, or no?
Well, it does, but let me ask you, who's the best guy for you? If you had to pick one of these people that are running right now, who would you want representing Canada? I kind of wish that Trudeau, and I'm not a Trudeau fan by any means, but I'm really impressed with no resume that he ran this country, and we're still in the top 25% of the best places in the world and the happiest place in the world, and he's been the leader for pretty well 10 years. And, he speaks well. I don't think he has the oomph or the experience or the knowledge to deal with Donald Trump, because I think there's a real hatred between the two of them. But who would you pick, Todd?
Yeah, well, look, if it comes to resumes, I mean, it's pretty evident. I've never been a fan of Justin Trudeau at all. But Pierre Poilievre, to your point, doesn't really have an impressive resume either. Somebody who graduates from university and gets right into politics and spends their entire life in politics, to me, that doesn't qualify them. Or I suppose anybody's qualified if they can get elected. But I don't like Pierre Poilievre's resume either, to your point.
Yeah. See, we talk about Trudeau, and I always think, if he was my son with a no resume and just on a name, became the Prime Minister of Canada and controlled a great country, which is still a great country, and we're proving it every day right now that it's a fabulous place to live. And I'm proud of even my daughter has got involved in researching and understanding more about Canada. There's a lot of people in Canada, the younger people, that didn't really appreciate what we have, and I think there's some growing pride, and I love that. So through difficulties grow miracles, and we're going to benefit. We're going to come out of this, and it's going to be okay. But I challenge anybody to tell me who would be a better person that's available to run Canada right now than Carney. Yeah. But that's my opinion.
Okay,
but
Kevin.
Anyway,
yeah, I hear you. Thanks for the call. Okay, look, if you were to post the job to be CEO of a country, let's say that's to replace the democracy, which I'm not advocating for, by the way. Well, let's say that was a selection criteria. I think that if you were to look at somebody's resume, he's absolutely right. Mark Carney's resume would likely stand apart from just about everybody's, and certainly Justin Trudeau's, and certainly Pierre Poilievre's, and Chrystia Freeland, and anybody else, I would say. Now, that said, look, people have the reservations about him because of his connection with and his affiliation with the World Economic Forum and some of his globalist ideas, and look, you're gonna get naysayers on all sides of these things. 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Hello, Todd. How are you, buddy?
I am well. You?
I'm good, bud. Let's gear down here a little bit. Yeah, Kevin's kind of on a rant there, whatever. But let's talk about hockey.
Okay.
I'm a huge hockey fan.
Okay.
Die-hard hockey fan, and I've been in that Bell Center. I've been in that, that place they play in Boston too. Fleet Center. It's not that big. It only holds about 16,500. But anyways, I would never boo the national anthem of anyone. When some kid's singing that song, I would never boo. Like, if they put a picture of Trump up on the Jumbotron, I might boo. But, no, I'm not booing the kid who's, she's nervous out there singing the anthem and she's getting booed.
Yeah.
That's pathetic. And another thing, too, is I don't like people putting Sid Crosby underneath the bus. He is a class Hall of Famer legend. And if you ever watch
who put him under the bus?
Movies,
who put him under the bus?
Is a legend.
Who put him under the bus?
And he is the leader of that team.
Who put him under the bus?
I've heard a few callers and say, "Oh, you can't skate fast anymore."
No. It was me. It was me who said.
You know what?
I said, Chris.
You didn't do anything wrong, Todd.
No,
you never did nothing wrong.
Well,
but I heard a few callers like that girl said, "Oh yeah, whatever. He doesn't deserve to be there." I guess he does. He's the leader of this country.
Yeah.
He could be the next prime minister.
Well,
he's a class act, and he knows how to win. He won the Stanley Cup as captain when he was 21 years old.
Yeah.
The guy is a living legend. He's motivating that team. They're going to win. And another guy, too, I got to give kudos to.
Yeah.
I haven't heard the name mentioned too much today on the show, is Nathan McKinnon will score the winning goal on Thursday night. Mark my words. Write it down on the calendar. McKinnon will have the best game of his life, and him and Crosby are best friends.
Okay.
So
Chris,
McKinnon will score the winning goal.
Okay, Chris.
On Thursday night.
Thanks for the call, pal. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000. To be in fairness, what I said about Sidney Crosby was this. I said Sidney Crosby is the captain. He should be the captain. He deserves to be the captain. He is still an amazing player, a great contributor, and deserves to be on that team. And is Sid the Kid, absolutely. But he's no longer the best player on the ice. When you get Connor McDavid out there, folks, and you watch what he can do, I'm sorry, but Sid Crosby is no longer at that level. But nobody else is either, quite honestly. Because this is the best player in the world that I'm comparing him to. So it's not like I'm saying Sid Crosby is horrible or he's the captain. He should be, deserves to be, and I'm glad he's there. And he's contributing and he's scoring and he's setting up goals. Absolutely, but he's not the best player on the ice anymore. That's all I said, and perhaps it wasn't needed to be said. Perhaps it wasn't. But you know what? That's sports, folks. Wayne Gretzky used to be the best player too, but he's not anymore. And everybody has their day. But I'm glad Sid Crosby's there, and he should be there. Absolutely. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. If in fact Team Canada had to, for whatever reason, select either Nathan MacKinnon or Sidney Crosby, if it came down to that, they had to have one or the other. And whoever was making the decision, that for whatever reason that was the decision that they were faced with, who would they pick? And I would say it would have to be Nathan MacKinnon. Would it not? That's all my point. That's all the point that I'm trying to make is, folks. That's it. No slam on Sidney Crosby in any way, shape, or form. Not at all. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hello, Bill.
Hello, Todd. Good morning.
Hi.
Yes, I'm just wondering about the Premier's visit down to Washington.
Yeah.
And when they came back, we heard from Susan Holt. We heard from Fury Fellow in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
We haven't heard much from our guy. It's
That's true.
He's not said a word about anything, and it just makes me think, because first when it come out, he came out swinging. Like he was going to do this, he was going to do that, and now we don't hear another word from him. I'd just like to hear an update from his perspective of what his take on it is. And
yeah, that's a good point.
That's just I've been snowbound now or icebound.
Yeah,
listening to the news and hearing everything, but hearing nothing from him. So. That's my issue here this morning.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
That's a good point. Okay, Bill. Thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. George. Hello, George.
Hey, good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I am well. You?
Oh, not bad. Look, my head's spinning here. Just give me a minute.
Sure.
Try and catch up with you. Sidney Crosby, just touch on him for a minute.
Yeah.
If anybody knows that, it's Sidney Crosby. He knows where he's at. He knows his games.
Yeah.
He knows what he did. He knows how good he is now.
Yeah.
And, But anyway, I got to laugh at all the liberal people out there now, the liberal so-called lovers of Mr. Carney. Carney, Freeland, and the other liberal leaders, I think, have all stolen Poilievre's line and have taken his policy. They're all going to axe the tax now. So everybody's jumping back in bed with the liberals. They forget what they did to us for these last 9 years. I look at the energy minister, Jonathan Wilkinson, just the other day. He put a stranglehold on all of the development in Western Canada, everything. And now he had the nerve, the phony, he had the nerve on TV the other day. Well, maybe we should look at an east-west pipeline. He had 9 years to do it, Todd. Now things are all of a sudden different because an election's pending, they want to get in, and all this. It's just a bunch of BS. And you talk about academics. If you remember, 8 years ago, I think the Liberals had a leader. He was an academic. He was a professor in university and all this kind of stuff. I can't think of his name. That's how much of an impact he had on me. But can you remember his name?
Michael Ignatieff, is that who you're talking about?
You got it right there. Now there's a guy right there that had a lot of, we'll say book smarts, education, and pedigree, and all that there.
Yeah,
he was a lousy leader.
George, I would say that Mark Carney's got a much more impressive pedigree than Michael Ignatieff had.
No, but he was an intellect.
Well, yes, that's right. He was an intellect, but Mark Carney was the governor of the Bank of Canada in England. I mean, Michael Ignatieff taught at Harvard, so I think it's quite different.
Okay, but I'm just saying, like Carney, they're taking Poilievre's line, axe the tax. They're all doing it now because they know That's what the people in this country want. And also, when you mentioned Polyev the other day, like he wasn't saying too much about his policies coming up, I think he's keeping it close to his chest because he doesn't know. Well, he can assume he's up against Carney. I guess we can all do that. But until it's finalized and then we have a full-blown election, he's not going to show his cards right now, I wouldn't think, until they get into full campaign mode.
Yeah.
Why would he?
Yeah.
Why would he do that? But anyway, that's just my point. Everybody's selling their Teslas and all that. What a joke that is.
Why is that? Why is that a joke?
Because it's stupid.
Why?
Why? Because of Elon Musk?
Sure.
Because he's finding billions of dollars that should have never been spent.
Because Elon Musk is behaving like a tyrant. That's why. Because
I don't know about that.
Oh, you don't know.
Doing a good job.
So I say, George. I see. So George, you would support if Pierre Poilievre won the next election, and he selected a multi-billionaire in this country with all types of conflicts of interest, and said, "You go into the public sector within a month, just arbitrarily get rid of entire departments without any oversight, and just start swinging the axe." You would support that? Really?
If he found corruption and fraud.
Okay, so that takes time,
does
it not?
That's what Elon's doing down in the States.
Wow.
If you watch...
He's a tyrant is what he is. He's a tyrant.
No, he's not. He's very intelligent. Everybody loves him until he started finding all the scandals going on down there in the U.S. government. The billions of dollars are wasting time. Come on.
You're drinking the Kool-Aid, George. Hard
I'm not
Kool-Aid.
Drinking it, man. I'm just a realist. But anyway, I don't want to talk about him.
Okay.
I just want to talk about what's going on in this country. And now all of a sudden we're going to be great to have no more interprovincial trade barriers. This should have been cut out long ago.
Yeah, that's true.
And I mean, all this kind of BS that's coming out of the liberal mouths. I mean, I was a liberal all my life until the last couple elections ago with Trudeau. He just killed me, man. He took the heart right out of me and everybody else across his land. It's just killing us here. So now we're going to, hoping to get rid of him. Like you said, you hope he goes away. I've heard you say that a million times. Because he's jet-setting steady, and he's on his last leg, and he's still going globally. Yeah. He's driving me crazy, too. I wish he'd just get out of here.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's just pray for Poilievre. That's all I got to say, because everybody's taking his policies and running with it.
Okay.
That's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks, George.
The original.
Thanks, George. All right, take care, pal. Take care, pal. You got it. Paul, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm well.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about the aluminum, and basically that it looks like the Trump administration is now sourcing aluminum in other places except for Canada. They're about to increase their importation from Australia, of all places.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to get as long as we do not cooperate with the United States in regards to the border and fentanyl.
Well, what do you mean if we're not going to cooperate? They've already cooperated, have they not? Have they not? They've appointed a border czar, or fentanyl czar. They've spent $1.6 billion or whatever on beefing up the border. What else?
Let's see what happens in the next 30 days or less than 30 days if that actually materializes. That's one thing. But you see, also the overriding issue with Trump is basically that we have to have military security within the archipelago, which is northern Canada, and that basically it's a global competition between China and the United States. And by the way, is he basing any B-52s in the United States? Because that's exactly what he's doing in Australia. Because and this has actually started with the Biden administration. They started rehabilitating the island of Tinian, which was where the atomic bomb was launched from, a large old air base with 4 runways that are 10,000 feet apiece. So basically what's going on is that the United States doesn't need us, and they're showing it, and they're finding new friends. I think people better settle down about fights at hockey games and booing the American national anthem, because it's not going to do you any good.
Well, it's a sad commentary, Paul. It's that you feel that if you have that little opinion of our country, I think it's kind of sad. But that is
It's
what
not
it
that
is.
I have an opinion of the country. It's that.
You were listening to the propaganda of Donald Trump saying he doesn't need us. You don't. That's not true. The energy exports that they are using of ours, they're using
Can be replaced by Venezuela.
No, it can't. So why isn't it then? Why isn't it replaced by Venezuela?
Well, it takes time, but the thing about it is that every time we lose market share to the world's biggest market, it's a detriment to us more than it is to them.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Did you happen to notice when he came into office that for tradition it was usually the Canadian Prime Minister was coming to Washington.
I'm just out of time. I'm sorry, Paul. I got to go. I am way over.
Okay,
I
thanks.
apologize. Okay. Thanks for the calls, everybody. We appreciate it. The Science Files with Rob Thacker when we come back. All right, the Science Files returns with Dr. Rob Thacker. The way to reach us is 902-405-6000. Again, the Science Files, Rob Thacker, St. Mary's University astrophysicist. Give us a buzz at 902-405-6000. Just as simple as that. If you've got a science-related question, 902-405-6000. Rob Thacker, we missed you last week.
I missed you all. In fact, I would have rather been on the show than what I was doing, which was sitting in the dentist chair.
Yeah.
But anyway, back now.
Dental surgery.
Yeah, molar broke, so I had to get a filling. So.
Wow. Were you nervous?
Everybody,
you always have a little bit of a nervous edge in going to the dentist. Even if it's just a cleaning, there's always a little bit of an edge.
I'll tell you what does get me nervous. Yeah. I don't like root canals.
Yeah.
Root canals are not fun. You get all the way up in there, and you can still sometimes get so far up you've still got a bit of the nerve feeling and so on. So I don't like those. But a filling, once you've done the jab, it's like, there we go. It's all good.
Well, it's funny because as a lot of people know, not everybody knows, but as many people know, I have had brain surgery fairly recently, within the past number of months. And I went to the dentist a couple of weeks ago, and I was a little more on edge at the dentist than I was for brain surgery. That is crazy, is it not?
Yes. So then my next question is, were you awake for the brain surgery?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
So then you are obviously going to be less nervous about it if you're not awake for it.
Well, I don't know. I guess. I don't know. I thought after brain surgery I'll be able to stride into the dentist's office and feel like,
oh, this is easy.
But I still had that little edge that is kind of, it's almost like a trigger from being a kid, I think, going to the dentist.
So one of the really interesting things about surgery is it's very dependent upon what your situation is, right? Yeah. So the last major surgery I had was gallbladder surgery. And I had a really pretty serious gallbladder attack, and the whole thing was swelled up like a melon and whatever. And so I wasn't feeling very good at all. And so when they took me in to do all the anesthesia, they were like, how you doing? And I'm like, just get me under and get this thing out of me, right? Yeah. And so that was really a situation where I just really wanted that thing out of me. And just let's get it done, right? So, yeah.
So you were prepared?
I was like, come on, let's go for it.
Yeah.
So I mean, there have been other times, like when I was really young, I had a abscess on my appendix, and that was pretty messy and horrible, and we had a drainage bag on that. That was pretty ugly. But yeah, no.
There you go. You are back. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us for the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker. If you would like to chat with Rob, give us a buzz. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Why do you think it is that we have been born embedded in our DNA in some way to remember traumatic things and have triggers? And there must be some psychological reason for that, right? Some beneficial reason for it. Things don't happen we're not embedded with these things for no reason.
It is interesting to think about the development of psychological responses, but we live in a world now that is really quite divorced from our heritage of hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? And so our responses to the world around us and the stresses that we feel are based in a bunch of things that have evolved over a very long period of time, right? And so you can imagine that there are going to be times when our actual response is not commensurate with what the situation requires, because we've had this long history of evolutionary biology that's created where we are now. And so people have talked about this in the context of, what is it? We have Neolithic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. E.O. Wilson quote, that is. And I think that makes the world around us a very difficult thing for us to deal with, right? Because we're literally facing questions, for want of a better phrase, that we're not honestly that well built to answer, right? Which sounds crazy, I know, given how much time we spend on education and everything. But what you have to remember is education is one thing, how you react to something is another thing altogether, right? And that's the challenge we face.
I guess, yeah, and I think of things that have kind of a double-edged sword, like pride and ego. These are things that, in pride in particular, where it's generally perceived as a bad thing. Yet it's good to, as human nature, to take pride in oneself and to want to build things, and that kind of feeds that. So it's the yin and the yang, how the balance of that, right?
So that sort of falls under the banner of what we call self-efficacy, right? And how much we believe we can do things and our own confidence in doing things as well. That is a really important thing, right? Let's not beat about the bush on that. And it can go too far, of course. Like, you can believe that you're completely infallible when in fact everyone is of course fallible.
Donald Trump.
Sure. And so it can go too far. But the flip side is, if you don't have any self-belief, you're not going to do very well in life, right? And that is unfortunate, because there are many people out there who have totally lack self-confidence, who are nonetheless really quite exceptional individuals, right? I've see it all the time, quite frankly, with students. And building confidence is an important part of literally growing up, right? And so you can see that there are some people who have been, I don't want to say sabotaged, but have been in an environment that hasn't built their self-confidence, and they can, in some cases, reap the repercussions of that throughout their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's a balance, right? It's like all things in nature, right? A balance.
No, it is. I mean, I don't pretend to be a psychologist, so I'm not going to be able to speak to this in a truly knowledgeable way. But you can certainly look at situations where people simply haven't been given the environment that they need to make them the best person that they can be, or even sort of like have more opportunities. I think that's really important, right? And there are always people who say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, and so on. There are some people who are very resilient no matter what, right? But I don't necessarily believe that those things are innate. There's a lot of things that happens in our environment to actually change who we are.
Okay, fair enough. 902-405-6000. Mike, hello.
Hello. First, I've got to pump your tires. I am very impressed with the breadth of your knowledge. It's incredible. Like what you know.
Okay.
Now I have a simple question.
He was talking to me.
No,
just kidding.
I wasn't.
I know. I was kidding.
So
that's very.
I have a simple question, which I have not. I've tried to Google. I've tried to ask people. I've tried to ask meteorologists. I can't get an answer. The jet stream. Now, it's a high wind that flows from west to east, but it controls a lot of our weather. How do you know the course of it from one day to the next? Because it varies so much. The course, is it atmospheric pressure? How is it?
Well, that's actually a good question. I'd never really thought about that, because obviously any wind speeds that we measure in our typical weather forecasts, we're doing from down on the ground. We can use anemometers and so on. So with the jet stream, I'm honestly not entirely sure. That's a great question. I would assume that at some level we have forecast predictions. You could also tell from what's happening to aircraft, of course. That is a good test, right? Because you'll basically know on the basis of how long an aircraft takes to get somewhere what the effective strength of the jet stream is. But off the top of my head, other than that, I mean, I'm not sure that we have any particular... Could we do it with radar? If you had things that were in the jet stream that you could track, of course, you could do that, I suppose. But off the top of my head, I don't know.
But they show it so precisely from one day to the next. That's what gets to be, and it can vary by such wide distances. I'm just always amazed by it.
Yeah, no, so, I mean...
I stumped you? Oh, good. Thank you.
I mean, sure. It's not something I've ever thought about, to be honest. So like I said, I mean, even where jets fly, I mean, that's still going to be, I don't know, a few tens of thousands of feet underneath some of the strongest jet streams. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back.
Thanks.
Right, it's the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University, 902-405-6000. If you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker, if you've got a question for Rob, give us a call at 902-405-6000. Just like that. Mark sends us an email question, says, how and when did gravity come into existence after the Big Bang?
There's a kind of a chicken and egg problem with that question. And so if you believe that there wasn't anything before the Big Bang, which is actually kind of hard to justify, but let's go with that, then if you don't have anything, you can't have something. And so that means that when basically the universe comes into existence, then gravity comes into existence along with it. Right. And that's probably the way that most people would like to think about it. The challenge with that is we take a very, very common sense approach to thinking about time, right? That it is this, for want of a better analogy, river that just keeps flowing and flowing and flowing. And so the idea of something happening before the Big Bang makes sense to us, right, in our everyday common sense way of thinking about time, but it may not have any real meaning in a more, how can I put it, more rigorous way of thinking about time, because it's a little bit like, how do you know you're moving if there's nothing else to measure yourself against? You can't do that. And it's the same, how do you know that time is passing if there's nothing else to measure time against? Right? So it is a little bit of a challenge, but most people would probably argue that once the universe comes into existence, you have what's called the quantum gravity state of the universe, in which case the theory of gravity is in a quantum state. And by definition, that means that gravity was existing at that time.
902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. Again, 902-405-6000.
Can I just butt in quickly?
Yes, please do.
Getting stumped is okay. But I do want to say that I did a little bit of checking on how we measure the jet stream, and the one that I missed was weather balloons, right? So meteorology stations will launch weather balloons. Those will go up, and anyone who knows weather balloons go very high, and so that will get up into the jet stream as well. But aircraft observations and radar, they're in there too as well.
Okay, fair enough. When was the second and 60 seconds is a minute and all of that? Who developed all of that?
So using 60s goes back to the Babylonians, right? I do know that. And so the Babylonians like to use 60 because, and this tells you how smart people were in the past, right? That if you don't have the decimal system that we have now, you want to have a number system whereby if you have an amount, you can divide it by a lot of numbers. And so 60 divides by a lot of numbers, right? You've got 1, you've got 2, you've got 3, right? 5, 10, 12, and so on. So you've got a lot of divisors for 60. So as a way of keeping track of things, it's a really good base, as we call it, to use, right? So again, if you don't have fractions, it's really good as well. So that was one of the reasons that the use of 60s, and in some cases 60s times 60s, cropped up. And so if you take that forward in time, then you have the natural way of describing what was going on, right, being in terms of minutes and seconds, right? And so my guess is it has to find a history somewhere back in the Babylonians, basically.
It's amazing how it holds up, though, eh?
Well, once you come up with a system of measurement, there is to a certain extent a reason for keeping that in place, right? Because once you have it calibrated, everyone wants to use that system. You don't want to, whenever you change what's called a unit system, imperial to metric, right? To give you an example, that just drives people crazy, right? Because they're used to measuring something one way and then they have to measure it another way.
902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Dave's giving us a call. Hi, Dave.
Hi. Boy, what a winter we've had.
Indeed. I know it. I know it.
Yeah. Talking about jet streams, I didn't think we were lined up to get this because the jet stream, I think, earlier was showing that we were going to be kind of unscathed. But this is a real old-fashioned maritime winter.
So it's been wobbling a lot. That's the key thing people have been talking about, and that tends to pull up a little bit of the warmer air and stop the colder air coming down. So it's definitely not happening this winter, though.
Well, I was wobbling yesterday on Family Day, so there you go. Having said that, my interest has been on this... I'm going to call it a probe, or I think it was the Stardust, and I think it flew by the comet, and if I'm not mistaken, Wild 2.
Okay.
And collected. Now, I don't believe it landed on the comet, but it collected the comet dust, ice, and whatever.
Yep.
And I think we brought that back, if I'm not mistaken, with the samples that it's recovered.
Sure.
Am I correct in saying this? I don't want to be...
so, yep. So Stardust is a few years ago now, though. It's like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something like that.
Okay, well, I thought there was something on January 2nd here that was brought back something just recently. I've been just sort of following science a little bit. But having said that, what do you think we're bringing back? Like, have you heard of any samples, bacteria... obviously, metals of sorts, I guess, that they've discovered as well. So, and I guess my big question is, because this thing's hurling through space in our solar system, this thing has to sort of catch up to it, be parallel with it. I'm not too sure.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a great deal of technology to be able to do this, which is amazing. We should be hearing more about this than doom and gloom that's going on. And could we be actually something that created, because we need so many things to happen, so many coincidences for life to exist, and there's so much life on this planet, that we may have come from a further cosmos. When I say life here,
yep.
Yes, maybe a bacteria, because if we are recovering things off the tail of this comet that's been out there for, let's say, millions of years, hundreds of thousands, who knows, right? Could have come from outside our galaxy or solar system. Who knows?
So what you're talking about
is it? Yes.
Is panspermia, right? And this is the idea that there is basically a bunch of ways that life can spread throughout the universe, right? So hitching a ride on asteroids ejected from one planet to another planetary system is what you would need in that kind of situation, or potentially on a comet or something like that. And so this has been theorized, but it's extremely difficult to test the theory, right? And that's one of the challenges that we have. All of the sort of like sample return missions we've had, including the recent ones with asteroids, those do tend to show that, yes, there are, in fact, essentially the building blocks of life on these things, right? And so you have all the acids you need to build DNA there, but they're not in a very sophisticated form. There's no sort of like RNA or anything like that. And so having what you need as the building blocks is fine, but getting to something that is actually consistent with being like, I don't know, a single cell creature or something like that, that's not something we've been able to do. And so there was this really, you may or may not remember, there was many years ago now, there was this asteroid that had been ejected from Mars, and there was a feeling that there was a bacteria, a fossilized bacteria on it. That turned out to be wrong. But that, if it were shown to, or had been shown to be incorrect, would have been an example of panspermia. But the honest answer is, at the moment, most of the things that we find don't sort of support that idea.
But it is feasible, as we learn more possibly about our galaxy, solar system, and universe, and we are learning at a rapid pace, especially with AI technology, I suppose, it is feasible that maybe we are not from this planet. What I'm saying is, how were we created? And again, there's so many.
It's not beyond the possibility that, say, life had evolved on Mars first or something like that. It's just a question of how likely is that. And again, that's a very difficult question to actually get your head around, right? So most people do sort of go back to the Occam's razor, which is work with the simplest thing you can first, and then go from there. So the main thing you got to remember is space is a harsh environment, right? We do know of some things that can survive in space, some bacteria. There was the beer bug experiment on the International Space Station that was very cute. But the question is, could they actually survive for thousands of years? Well, that means they'd have to be reproducing and so on. And that kind of looks less likely to most people.
Right, yeah. And don't forget, Earth was hostile and has been hostile many times in the past.
Yep.
And then we are created through evolution or whatever, just a magnificent array of fluky things that had to occur, correct?
That's certainly a working hypothesis. There's the Ward-Brownlee rare earth hypothesis, that there's been a whole bunch of things happen that have made the Earth what it is and life what it is here. And those are rare things.
So let's appreciate what we have, right? Anyways, I appreciate your answer, and that's it's always fascinating to learning about outer space and the way it's we're learning so rapidly too, and appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Take care. 902-405-6000. Science Files continues when we come back.
Thanks.
All right, it's the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, astrophysicist. Give us a call if you'd like to chat with Rob, 902-405-6000. That is the way to do it. Again, 902-405-6000. Alexander, hello.
Hi, good afternoon, Todd. Good afternoon, Dr. Thacker.
Hello.
I think, Dr. Thacker, everyone knows that we have a problem with plastic pollution in the world.
Yep.
Whether it's litter or now it's microplastics ending up in our bodies and brains. I was reading about a group of scientists who are trying to develop bacteria that will consume plastic pollutions, and I'm just wondering, is that feasible, and is there a danger of releasing a bacteria into the world that's engineered? And I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.
Sure. So, people have been thinking about this for quite some time. And so one of the key things is developing enzymes that will break down the bonds in plastics. And that's really, there's a whole bunch of different approaches to that, right? But one of them is to use bacteria. And so there are bacteria that have naturally evolved to break down things like waxes, which are quite similar to plastics chemically. And so if you can find out how they do it, what the particular enzymes that they create are, then yes, you could, in theory, start using some of these bacteria to break them down. It's not an unreasonable idea. There's sort of like talks of doing this in reactors, so you can try and contain the bacteria in one way or another. So I think it's actually quite a sensible idea. It's just a question of being able to make it as efficient as we can. And so the alternative is, rather than to use the bacteria, is to use the enzymes themselves. So to create sprays, you stick all of the plastic in and you put sprays on there, and then the enzymes start going at it and start breaking the plastics down. So I think we're going to hear more and more about this, if I'm honest, but people have been doing research into it for quite some time now, and the challenge is that most of the ways we found of actually breaking the plastics down, they're just not very efficient. They're not very speedy either, right? So that's really the challenge. How can we do this more quickly? And but overall, yeah, there's a lot of research on this, and I think we're going to continue to hear more about it.
902-405-6000. That's the way to reach us for the Science Files. Give us a buzz if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. Get some open lines for you. Again, 902-405-6000. But when you look at the ubiquitous nature of plastic, I know we've talked about this, but it's absolutely everywhere. I'm just looking around the studio here. Mm-hmm. What synthetically might possibly replace that? Anything?
Well, so good old wood. I mean, quite literally, wood is this very rapid growth. I mean, especially if you use something like bamboo, right? And you can use those things. And the point, why would we prefer that? We prefer that simply because those particular things, there's multiple bacteria in the environment already that will break them down. Like you throw bamboo into a landfill, it's going to break down. Right. So that's the key thing. I mean, you can build biodegradable plastics, but the challenge with them is it's kind of a chicken and egg, because when you use a plastic, you're using it because it's so long lasting, right?
Yeah.
And so when you use biodegradable plastics and they break down and they're not particularly strong and things like that, then people are sort of like, not as good as the regular plastic. So so it's a little bit of a challenge on that front, but we definitely have alternatives. And for things like cutlery, there are alternatives that have been around for a long time, right? I mean, I think it's just we're going to have to get back to, or get away from, the throwaway culture. Right, I just buy this and I throw it in a garbage can. That's what we're getting away from, and we are. Like if you look at cups, like we've literally got into the habit now of anyone who is a big coffee drinker carries their steel mug around and reuses it, right? Which is great, right? That's cut down on a lot of waste, but there's a lot more waste out there, unfortunately, and part of the big problem is where it's ending up. Right, we tend to sort of think, oh, this just all ends up in a landfill somewhere, it's contained. But as we know, there are a number of rivers around the world where there's just plastic waste flowing out into the ocean. Right, and that's a serious problem.
902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Don. Asking you. He says, I've been watching BBC Earth called Planets and Professor Brian Cox. Could you ask Dr. Rob if he's familiar with this and any comments he has to offer?
What's the name of the series?
It's called BBC Earth, called Planets and Professor Brian Cox, or rather Planets with Professor Brian Cox.
I mean, I can't say I've seen it personally. I mean, I know Brian. I've met Brian a couple of times. So generally anything he puts his name to is something that he's pretty careful about. I will say that. So and, you know, there's been an awful lot of very good documentaries on BBC over the years. I will say that as someone who grew up with BBC documentaries. So my guess is I've just found it. So the planets, it's 8 majestic planets. Yeah, so it's Brian. It's going to be well-researched. It's going to be eminently watchable. So, and he's pretty careful. He doesn't stick his neck out on things and talk about crazy things, which I know there are some commentators who do, and Brian tends to be much more careful than that. So yeah, it should be a good series.
Okay, 902-405-6000. The story that caught my eye last weekend, I wanted to ask you about it. I'll just read a bit of it.
Sure.
It says, a new study offers a clearer picture of how planets are born alongside stars, findings that are an exciting step toward understanding the development of planets and their atmospheres, the lead researcher says. Dora Blakely, a doctoral candidate at the University of Victoria, said researchers have known that planets form by pulling in mass from gas and dust left over from formation of stars, a process known as accretion, I believe is how it's said. What's your comment on this?
So it's been a real challenge for us to understand how quickly the big planets in the solar system actually evolve. And so while this is difficult is because they're not sort of like all made of the same stuff inside. They have what's called differentiation. So the bigger planets like Jupiter, they have a lot of gas in them, for example, as well as probably having a much higher density core, right? And so understanding how they form has been really, really hard, right? So we do simulations, and some simulations predict that as the star forms, there'll be a disk of material around the star. We think that's you're pretty much going to expect that. We see all of these disks around other stars now, so that theory looks really solid. It's just a question of how the disk itself evolves, right? And does material suddenly become unstable and start sort of like collapsing into a planet? And there are some theories where that could happen really, really quickly, like something the size of Jupiter formed within 1,000 years, which is really quick, right, for the scale of the evolution or creation of a star, for example. And so now we've got all of these additional sort of measurements of these systems. We can start to look at not only how do those planets form, but what the material in the disk would be that might actually form an exomoon system, moons around planets, right? So that's just what James Webb is just starting to get at. And so the main challenge with this research is you can't figure everything out just from like one or two observations. You need a whole bunch of them, right? So this is very much a situation where we're just starting to see the sort of like first few results with James Webb, and over the next few years, we'll actually get more of them and we'll understand this better through that.
902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. So in solar systems or galaxies far, far away, not these things are happening, are they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, planets are forming in our own galaxy, yet alone other galaxies. And so one of the amazing things that's happened in my lifetime is that we've gone from not even knowing whether there are planets around other stars. Like literally, we didn't know, right? To now us knowing that planets are so common, there's probably more planets in our galaxy than there are stars.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? It's pretty incredible, right, to be alive to know that. Right?
Indeed. 902-405-6000. Give us a buzz if you'd like to chat with Rob Thacker. We've got Rob to the top of the hour. Get some room for you as well. 902-405-6000. The Science Files continues when we come back. All right, the Science Files with Dr. Rob Thacker, astrophysicist, St. Mary's University, continues. 902-405-6000. Carl, hello.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
We're well.
Good.
Dr. Rob, I was wondering, in billions of years from now, when the sun starts to die and it becomes a red giant and starts expanding out into the solar system, will it retain its gravity and its hold on the solar system, or will we start moving farther away as it starts dying?
So that's a good question. I mean, one of the challenges is that once the sun goes into the red giant phase, it's going to swell up and get very, very big, right? And so it probably will lose a little bit of mass in that process as well. But I haven't seen any good estimates recently. So I know when I was growing up, people felt that it would get so big that it would actually swallow up the Earth and so basically burn the Earth to a crisp. But I've not seen any estimates of how big the red giant stage would be for the sun recently. And I'm sure there have been some better calculations on that. So it will literally blow off a little bit of mass. So as that mass sort of like disappears, then yes, there'll be a small change, but that's going to happen fairly slowly. Right. So you should be, if we're concerned about this sort of solar system falling apart, you got to be more concerned about the red giant phase literally sort of toasting the Earth. That's the thing that you need to be more concerned about at that stage.
Okay. I was just thinking that if it lost gravity, then we would, as it got bigger, we would get further away and maybe survive. That's not
going to happen, unfortunately. But I mean, we've got billions of years until then. So if humanity hasn't figured out how to get off the planet by then, well, we're going to be toast, quite literally.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Here's an email question from Tom. Says, what science fiction does Rob enjoy and recommend? I recently watched the Netflix series, The Three-Body Problem, and the science seems to be sound. Any comments?
So I love what's called hard science fiction. So that's science fiction where the science is really a big part of the story. And for a long time in the 60s and 70s, that was really, really popular kind of science fiction. And that's not popular anymore, right? So I have a hard time finding that. So The Three-Body Problem is a fairly recent dramatization. That's a pretty good series. The thing that I struggle with for The Three-Body Problem is I find the whole sort of theory behind the dark forest and so on, I find it very depressing, right? It's just this idea that any civilization that becomes dominant will choose to wipe out another civilization because the other civilization will eventually become a threat. I mean, if you can't figure out how to survive by collaboration, I mean, that's just depressing, right? So I don't actually like that hypothesis, although I know there will be people who will love to debate it and so on. So I did watch the series. I did find it quite interesting to watch. But my favorite series of the past few years is probably The Expanse. And so I think that had like 6 series, and that I really, really enjoyed. It got a little bit wacky towards the end, but I really enjoyed that particular show. And I'm waiting for another one that's as good, to be quite honest.
It's called The Expanse?
The Expanse, yeah. So that's set a few hundred years into the future, where basically we have a lot of asteroid mining. People can live on asteroids in low-gravity environments. And you have people on Mars, you have humans on Earth, and there's sort of conflict between the two of them as well.
902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us for the Science Files. We get some time for you to the top of the hour, get some open lines as well if you'd like to get a call in. 902-405-6000, that is the way to reach us for the Science Files. All right, you sent me some stories, as you always do, and always very interesting stories. So I'll let you pick. Why don't you pick one or two of these that you'd like to highlight?
Do you want to do the jumping mice?
Yeah, sure, do that.
So people may know that astronauts have a real struggle in zero gravity of keeping bone density as well as sort of muscle character and so on. We've been able to figure out ways around muscle. Muscle's just getting weaker. You can exercise, and that actually helps. With bone, it's a bit harder, right? Because when you're out of gravity, then the loading that bones basically get every day, you just don't have it there. So you still, even if you do exercise, you still lose some bone density. And on top of that, one of the other things is you can lose cartilage, right? And so they've done some experiments with mice. And I should say this is mice. Mice obviously are different from humans, where they got the mice to jump. Right, they literally trained the mice to jump, and the mice that jumped, right, and don't ask me how they did the measurements of the cartilage, I don't know, but they found that mice who were trained to jump actually built up thicker cartilage, right? And so what this research is suggesting is that we could actually help astronauts to improve their cartilage by having them go through a pre-flight routine, pre-flight training of literally jumping as a preventative measure, and then while they were in flight, potentially having some kind of system that would allow them to jump, whether it was on a spring or something like that, to keep their cartilage built up. One of the reasons why cartilage just literally wears away, I mean, that's probably the wrong word, it just sort of like goes away slowly, is if you just don't do anything, right? It just doesn't get built up, and so it will go away over time. And they found this with the mice. They found that the mice that they literally had do a very sedentary life, they lost 10% of their cartilage thickness. And then the ones that were trained to jump, they actually got, I think it was about a 25% increase, right? So it's a pretty significant difference between those two scenarios. And so this is kind of like a neat little thing of where it sounds crazy. They were training mice to jump to learn about how astronauts can survive better in zero gravity. So I thought it was a cute little story.
There you go. Brian, hello.
Hey, good morning, guys. Dr. Rob. I was listening to what you're talking about there, and it reminded me of a news article I read a few years ago, and they were using a vibrating plate on kids who had low bone density, and they would sit, or I don't know if they sat or laid on the plate, and it vibrated, and it made their bones denser. Can they use something like that maybe up there in the space station or something, you know?
Certainly. I mean, that's not far off what we've just talked about, as you said. So anything like that, where you have an alternative way. I mean, the one question I would have is what aspect of the vibration was actually contributing to the bone density. That would be interesting to know, because if it's something that only works when you have gravity, then it probably wouldn't work. But
yeah, true.
Right.
True.
So we have been able to improve it somewhat. Like just getting people to exercise underweight does improve bone density somewhat, but you still do lose a bit of it.
So what do they do up in the space station? Do they have like a surgical tubing or something for resistance or something? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so they literally have banding systems, so elastic systems that keep you weighted, right? So I know they have that on the treadmill that they have up there, and so literally that's what you're doing to sort of simulate running. But it's not the same, and the bones still respond differently to it. I mean, the gravity has an impact on you all the time. Right, and I think that is one of the key things. When you're in a sort of like weightless environment, like when you're in orbit, then you're only in that sort of activity for like 1 or 2 hours a day. Whereas on the Earth, we're in it all the time. Like it's 24 hours a day.
Can I ask you another question? This one has been bothering me all my life. When I was a young kid, I saw a movie where they created a space station that actually spun on its axis and created a artificial gravity. Why don't we do that? Is it just too expensive?
It is. It's a challenge to do. There is a whole research program on basically simulating microgravity via centrifugal processes. Funnily enough, I went and looked to see where that was, and there's still a lot that we don't know in terms of how strong does the microgravity have to be to preserve things like bone density. We don't know. Funnily enough, I think we'll probably find out some of those things if we go back to the moon for extended periods, or if we go to Mars for extended periods. We may find out there first. And so there is a whole program of research about this. The idea makes complete sense, but it's also, what you've got to remember is to actually have enough gravity, you've got to be able to rotate around fairly quickly. And people in general can adjust to that, but it's not great to see things constantly going by in the window. That can be a bit disorienting for people. But nonetheless, they have spent time putting people in rotational environments. Because the other thing that happens is, literally, like, things don't, if you throw something, it doesn't fly how you think it's going to fly. Right? Because the gravitational field becomes very local and weird things happen, and you have to get used to those, right? So it's not as simple as people think it is. It's actually quite a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I kind of figured that's why.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, guys, well, have a great day.
Okay, pal, take care. Rob Thacker, always great. Thank you so much. Glad you could make it this week. Hopefully you don't have any more dental issues.
Thanks, and thanks for the great questions, everyone.
All right, take care. That's Rob Thacker. It's the Science Files. We do that each and every Tuesday. Thanks to Blake Priddle on the other side of the glass. Did a great job, as always, sitting in for Vanessa. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.